Great. Kafir, can you just confirm that we live and you can hear and see us as well? Okay, fantastic. And we're missing Francois. Yep. I don't know if I can't see him. I guess we'll start. I guess he's going to join. We probably got some technical problems. Stephen, welcome. Good to have you. We haven't met face to face, but at least good to see you virtually. I believe that's the new norm going forward of APIs. Stephen, obviously, I mean, you don't need introduction. Yeah, I mean, you're the CEO of Fortress, which is one of the big listed REITs. Interestingly, your REIT has involving portfolio of different types of properties from logistics, retail, industrial, residential, commercial. So pretty much everything in the value chain. Obviously, even before COVID-19, the REIT in South Africa has been sort of facing a challenging period since the last couple of years, I would say. But before we get into the topic of the day, which is the adoption of Proptech for companies like yourselves or REITs like yourselves, you know, with huge portfolio, I would like to welcome Francois. Good to have you, Francois.
Thank you.
Hope you can hear us and can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Good to see you. I think we last spoke a couple of months ago on a webinar. Absolutely. So we all alive and kicking, yeah, despite COVID. Stephen, so I wanted to ask you, Stephen, I mean, we've only got half an hour, so it's going to be very quick. Before we get into Proptech as such, an adoption of Proptech by a portfolio like yourself, can you just give us your sort of 2-minute summary of the challenges that you've been facing pre-COVID and the challenges that you've been facing over the last 6 months during the COVID crisis?
Look, I think pre-COVID, I mean, it was really the South African economy that was, you know, I think it was tenants were struggling. There was very little growth. So I think that was, you know, those were the challenges facing, I think, Fortress and the whole property sector before COVID. And then COVID hit, and it really didn't help. You know, it was an absolute disaster. But I think we have, you know, we've learned a few things. I think to get much closer to our tenant. You know, I think that the problem was trying to identify tenants who were really having a tough time, and those weren't, and especially when we can't go out and see them. You know, so I think that was something that we realized actually quite challenging when you're in a virtual world to actually go and see your physical assets and see how the tenants are doing out there and meet with them face to face. And you know, I think one element of what we've seen globally is that especially where you have a number of unlisted tenants or, you know, perhaps smaller privately owned businesses, is how do you tell how your tenants are actually performing, what their credit strength is like, can they afford the rental, do they need a discount, do they need a rental deferment or some cash flow holiday? I think globally landlords have not been at assessing, you know, the sort of credit strength of their tenants where they are unlisted. You know, and I think that's something that we've noticed and tried to address in a lot of our portfolios. You know, you get a bank loan, an overdraft for 50,000 rand, and the bank checks your financial statement every 6 months. If you let a tenant into a 500 million rand warehouse, and they get a little bit cross with you when you ask for their financial statement. So I think we've noticed that's been a bit of an issue in the COVID crisis. You know, and we've got physical assets, so we can't go out and see them. It's difficult.
Sure, great. I guess the adage of adapt or perish, yeah. I would. That's how you have to evolve, basically, yeah, and eventually adapt, yeah. Francois, give us, I mean, over the last couple of years, and more so since last year, and then we've seen with the COVID crisis, you know, we've been hearing about Proptech. You know, I mean, a couple of years ago, Proptech wasn't even a feature of the API Summit, for example. You know, so give us your sort of quick definition of Proptech. Yeah, how would you, in 30 seconds, how would you summarize what Proptech is all about? Is it a buzz? Is it something that we had already? Or is it something that's really new and something that's really going to disrupt or is already disrupting the real estate sector? Sorry, Francois, we can't hear you. Doesn't seem like it. Stephen, can you hear him or is it just me?
No, I can't hear Francois. Is this Proptech? Or is this just tech?
I think it's just the tech.
Proptech.
I think you're on mute. Well, we're going to get there, I guess, slowly but surely. Oops. Okay, Stephen, let me continue with you while we're going to get him back again, hopefully very soon.
Sure.
So in this Adapt Parish, what has been, did you have a Proptech strategy prior? Or do you have a Proptech strategy?
Look, I mean, I think we do. I think we've got more of a Proptech dream. We've got some aspirations about where we want to be and what we want to be able to access, from a sort of technology point of view. And it really is around managing the properties with, better systems. And, we develop a lot of warehouses. So it's about installing smart meters, water meters, a lot more technology so that we are less beholden on manual intervention and manual processes to manage our buildings. And then obviously the technology in the building process. So, and I think when we look at the small little incremental changes that we busy make, it's quite easy to dream about where you want to be, but I think it's actually quite difficult to try and figure out what you need from a tech perspective to get there, and without breaking the bank. So I think that's the challenge is how do you get the end.
Which I'll come back to that because I've got another question on that perspective.
Can you hear me now?
Who do you back and what do you choose, etc., and making sure you choose the right stuff for the future. Francois, hopefully it's working now.
Can you hear me now, Kevin?
No, you're still on mute.
I can hear you, Francois. I can.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear him?
I can hear Francois.
Hello.
I don't know why I can't hear him, but well.
Stephen, I can hear you. Sorry,
Francois, maybe you can
to stop the
give us the.
discussion.
Okay, I can hear you briefly now, but it's fading in the background. But if you can give us the definition of Proptech, is it a buzzword or is it going to really happen, or are you seeing it really happening as we speak?
Look, the thing with Proptech is that obviously it has taken time to catch up with the market. And what does Proptech really do? I think it offers us an opportunity to improve our efficiencies in the market. And I think that's probably what it tries to achieve. When I start a discussion around property, it's always high transaction costs. We place an emphasis on the lack of information. And I think what Proptech does is that it alters the way we do business. We've often talked of the forces that impact on the property market, assuming that the property market itself will carry on doing things in the same way as it's been doing for years. And I think what Proptech really does is it starts entering the box itself and starts looking at a different way of operating in the property market. And I think that that's what Proptech does.
And how do you, if you compare South Africa, because obviously you are entrenched in South Africa, but you also have got a network globally, where do you see South Africa and Africa, obviously as part of the continent, where do you see us from a PropTech adoption compared to other major continents? You know, we've seen, for example, this morning earlier on, we had somebody from Netherlands, etc. We're seeing, you know, spots of other places where, be it whether it's the US or Netherlands or Europe, you know, they're pretty advanced. So where do you think we are in that cycle?
Look, obviously, if we look at technology entering the market, it will be slower. And we must remember that sometimes our markets are exactly smaller than what we see in Europe or the US. So the economies of scale, if you want to call it that, are very different. But what I do want to say is that I believe that PropTech offers us enormous potential in this country and across the continent. And the typical example I would use is that there are still too many individuals across this continent who can't play the property market, if I can put it in those words. You know, for about $7 a shot, and probably less than that, we can start giving people title deeds. You know, and it's those sort of technologies which become important. And I think that if there's one advantage that we may have across the continent, is that we can probably skip some of the technologies of the past and move immediately into an environment where we use these the new PropTech technologies. And I'm particularly interested around work that we could do around deeds registries and the efficiencies of those. And I think that that's probably where we will see the application of technology. Look, ultimately, we've got Reits, and they've been with us, but I don't think that the world will stop with Reits. It didn't stop with the institutions. It didn't stop with the pension funds years ago. Markets evolve. And I think what will become interesting in the years to come is, as somebody said, can we see a farmer in Kenya for $1 enter the property market? Some will argue that for less than $1 you can enter some South African REITs, and yet you don't need those technologies. But I think it has more to do with the access that we could see to that. So products will change, and I think that the access to the property market and what we can offer through PropTech becomes very, very interesting.
Thanks, Francois. And Stephen, would you agree? I mean, what Francois just sort of the description he gave us, and also what are you seeing from a practical point of view? Because you are, you know, an operator. You've got multiple assets, or different types of assets, and the question is, how do you, as a CEO, how do you make sure you're choosing the right PropTechs? You know, do you go after stuff that are made in South Africa, or do you go for best practice overseas? How do you ensure that you make the right decision?
Look, I think that's very difficult. I suppose it's like anything, sort of follow a bit of common sense. You know, when you look at implementing, you know, dare I say it's a big global software program that does everything for everyone. You know, and obviously they come and they sit there and they say, we're going to change the whole backbone of how you guys do management of properties and accounting, and you know, it's going to cost you 50 million, and you kind of get very scared. And generally when I'm scared, it's, you know, it's for a good reason. So I think we, you know, when we look at it, and I'll take some small, you know, small things like just the electronic meters that we've got. So we've got electronic water meters at our retail centers, which will tell us how much council water we're consuming, how much water each tenant's consuming, and you know, how much borehole water we're consuming at any one time. And from that, we can see leaks, and we can tell the tenants, listen, we think that you left a tap on at this time and it comes up with alarm. Now that is just, it's doing what you always wanted to do, but instead of having a security guard wandering around the property trying to see if someone left a tap on or there's a leaking toilet or something like that, you've got the technology to do it. Same as, smart electronic electricity meters, you're saving the guy driving out there, and inevitably that human intervention leads to error. So, you irritate the tenant. So I think it's all of that stuff where it starts to make common sense and it's financially viable that you go, well, that actually looks great. And often, we've taken the approach that we might not be on the cutting edge. Let's try and see what technology is working, wait for it to get affordable, and then start implementing that in our business. So we've looked at a number of different solutions, and I think that the problem is most South African REITs, a lot of them outsource their property management, so you need interface. So we've got a slightly different requirement. And we've looked at some global solutions. None of them made any sense to me. Too expensive, too distant, no on-the-ground support. So we've actually chosen something locally built. It was pretty cost-effective. It's very adaptable, and I was, to be honest, blown away how easy it was to give our asset managers a much better user-friendly system that was, built in SA by kind of people that you know really well versus buying off-the-shelf, supermarketed global product, which we couldn't get our head around.
And Stephen, I would assume in your portfolio, I mean, you've got a mixed bag of properties besides asset class, but also in terms of stuff that you've bought, you've inherited, and also new developments. So are there possibilities where you identify specific Proptechs to roll out in your portfolio, or you have to adapt depending on the age of some of the buildings or some of the properties, or even in terms of your new developments, yeah? Because you're also involved in new developments as well, yeah?
Look, the new developments is easy. When you're looking at, let's say a classic warehouse cost us about 200 million rand for 20 to 25,000 square meters. So to go and add a few million on some smart technology, and that includes the better building processes, roofs that can take the solar, things like that, makes absolute sense. So that's actually quite easy for us to do. Retrofitting is harder and more expensive, and often you can't do it. It's just financially not viable. So I think what does excite us is that new development pipeline that we've got of warehouses and logistics parks. That's great. You can go and add technology and try and fast forward 10 years and see what the issues are with retrofitting, because you know that the technology is going to change. That is one thing you can be guaranteed. The older stuff that we've inherited, that is where the headaches lie, and actually where you need the cost containment. Hopefully the technology provides.
And in your organization, who would typically drive this? Is it yourself, or is it the CTO, or is it a new job description?
Look, I mean, me, the CFO, and our chief operating officer have all been driving it and making sure the direction is correct. I think it's like anything in an organization. The more top level support and interaction you give a strategy, the often the more effective and efficiently it gets rolled out. But we do need guys who understand it. I'm not going to lie. The pace of change is so fast that you do need the kind of technology guys to actually understand it. But if you're looking to say, well, who's in charge, I think it's so imperative that you, as you say, you adapt or die. So that really does fit on my desk.
Yeah.
And Francois, I mean, are you seeing the same thing as well? Because you're also involved, besides with the university, you're also involved, if I'm not mistaken, you're a board member of a listed REIT or a listed real estate company. Are you seeing more or less the same thing as well?
Look, Kevin, I mean, at the moment, anything that can improve vacancies, reduce operating costs, is something that I think every REIT in South Africa will be looking at the moment. So especially the containment, and I'm taking a bit the South African story at the moment, where we see our operating costs still rising by above the inflation rate. In other words, the increases that is coming down to us. So I think that right now, if we take the REIT environment, yes, from a financial, the balance sheets have sometimes to be restructured, but the name of the game is property. Yeah, you've got to get down to the fundamentals in this environment and get yourself through it. And I think that that's where it becomes important. But I also want to add another thing, Kevin, that I'm increasingly taking a view that the property market is no longer about just merely trying to let GLA and let the tenant in. It's more and more becoming a service, and I've made the point that I think many of our property companies are going to look more and more like hotel groups in the years to come, in what is being delivered. And why I'm saying that is that places an enormous emphasis on facilities management. If you're trying to create an environment for your tenants, a working environment, I think we're moving away from this here's space and put in your desks and look after yourself. And I think there's a greater and greater expectation from property owners going forward and what is delivered. And I think that technologies will have a role to play, a greater role to play in the creation of that environment, how space gets used, how tenants interact with that space. And technologies will play a role there. And then ultimately, look, I'm not saying that we are at the point where we will have an Airbnb for the commercial property market. But what I am saying is that, we've learned a few lessons during COVID, and many of our leases could start looking differently. I think there's a focus, for example, on turnover clauses, which could become more important. And I think that the technologies will need to adapt to the changing structure of how we interact with property. And I think how we monitor our leases and turnover and issues of that sort, I think will start giving us new opportunities.
And on that note, we've got a couple of minutes left. Maybe Stephen, on your side, how do you look from a return on investment perspective when you need to choose? How do you work out that sort of ROI?
Look, I think some things are very easy, some things are very hard. As I was saying, smart meters, we look at how much it costs the guy on a Thursday to drive out there in his bucky and go and read the meter, and he gets it right 9 out of 10 times. So that one was easy. And smart water meters, we said we'll roll them out and let's see how much we save. We were losing 1,000 last week. We picked up a property losing 1,000 liters an hour. So, I think it's quite hard to look at it like that. I think it's more about where you want to go and how you want to, as Francois said, sort of interact with how the tenants interact with the property and how they also interact with us as the landlord. And I think these things are more difficult to peg an ROI and, well, what's the initial yield and what's the 10-year growth and how do you do a DCF, as opposed to saying, look, unless we do these things, we're going to be out of rate. We might not have tenants left at the end.
Thanks, Stephen. And Francois, do you have anything to add on that, on the ROI perspective?
No, look, I think where one has to be careful sometimes with technologies is that the costs of bringing in some technologies can be relatively low, believe it or not. And if it doesn't work immediately, there's a fairly quick temptation to do away with it. and to go and do something else. So I think what is important here is that those technologies have to show the returns immediately. And I think Stephen made the point, so sometimes you do it in-house, do you buy it off the shelf? And I think that's an important point. And I think that's where we have to be very, very careful that these technologies get integrated in the business easily. Because if they aren't, there's a very strong temptation to say, well, let's go on to something else. Because in the sphere of things, some of those technologies are actually relatively inexpensive sometimes to bring in. But it's that integration into the business, which I think becomes so important.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. I've also seen quite a lot available, cheaply available, but I guess it's about the decision, making the right decision of choosing the right stuff that's going to bring efficiency in managing your portfolio. We've reached the end. I don't know if there are any questions.